XP is when a character seems to have been brought in from another media with a similar character of that same archetype, usually with some differences. This XP may take inspiration from the appearance, the personality, the story they go through, or maybe down to the voice actor that voices said character. In the Star Rail community, you may hear about them quite often, especially now with pretty much every single Amphorius patch. The game that these XPs are most often exported from is none other than the not so widely known older sister of Hoyo games, Honkai Impact 3rd. It's a game from the times you could still see the name MiHoYo on the loading screen. For those Star Rail players who never played the game before, hi, I've been following the story of Honkai Impact 3rd religiously for about half a decade, and today I want to talk about how Star Rail is handling these exported characters, how big of a deal they are, whether or not you should care or should not care about them. This video will be understandable even if you haven't played Honkai Impact before, so let's begin. Currently, the Amphorius story is a story about the 13 Flame Chasers fighting against their fate, which isn't a unique theme in Star Rail by any means, but what sets this story apart was its inspiration from a widely popular story arc from Honkai Impact about also the Flame Chasers. Usually I would call Honkai Impact Honkai and the other one Star Rail, but it seems like we're getting even more Honkai games nowadays, so I guess I'll just need to change how I refer to these entries. Anyhow, in Amphorius we have many colorful faces like John Ordinary, the cat,
Stupid.
Angry Man, and of course, these are some of the most obvious ones, while some others are still debatable whether or not they're still XPs. This group of characters are just a small part of the many things Star Rail took from its predecessor, and in order to show you the significance of this, I've gathered 3 instances that we have had in Star Rail that dealt with these XPs and the themes and ideas that was brought over with them. One of the first things you notice about Honkai Star Rail when you first try the game is the multiverse, a guy who literally traveled from Honkai Impact to Bronyas and half a dozen XP mostly congregating on Belobog. This may make some wonder whether they should have played 3rd before to not miss out on stuff, so let's see if we are missing any here. First, there's Seele, Bronya and Cocolia, which back in 3rd, the first 2 were orphans that Cocolia took in. They were very close. As for Cocolia, she's pretty chill, but not really, as she was running the place to experiment on the orphans. Even though she does seem to care about the 2, expressing regret for when she lost Seele, Bronya then stayed with her for a bit until Cocolia got too crazy with the Honkai stuff. Now comes Star Rail, we mostly see Bronya and Seele develop over the course of the story, ending very close by the end, just like it did in the other universe. While Cocolia, well, yeah. This is how most XPs will go in Star Rail. They mirror or parallel an aspect of their character. In this case, you don't lose anything if you didn't know where these characters came from prior to Star Rail. But sometimes the game stretches this quite a bit. In a quite blatant move, we got a scene back in Penacony where Welt took someone aside to tell him about his encounter with the man who tried to pull the same thing Sunday was trying to do. In this scene, Welt refers to his experience for his philosophical discussion with Acheron on why life slumbers. It's one of the more popular philosophical questions that Honkai likes to throw around. You may have heard these trauma-inducing sentences like, why do birds fly? And the god-forsaken Plato's cave. In one part, this scene was a fan service to the Honkai players, made very obvious by how Welt also includes some of his own commentary on the character of the Kaslana from his universe. Back then, it surely didn't hit as hard as it does now, but most importantly, it created intrigue to a piece of media that I'm sure many who play Star Rail didn't have prior experience with. For the many scenes in the game's story, some are just rehashes of a familiar concept, usually with a different execution this time around. To which the entire plot of Amphorius is just a big rehash. Let's set the scene. So the Flame Chaser storyline that Amphorius is based off of was a story where once upon a time there was a civilization that came into contact with an unknown extra-dimensional entity called the Honkai. This force of nature poses an existential threat to humanity by periodically sending mini-bosses to test the humans. These things are called Hershers, and in this time period, 13 prominent figures rose up called the Flame Chasers. Honkai stuff appears, they go beat it up and start to develop weapons and augments from the remains of these things they kill, but it comes at a cost. Very similar to the demigods of Amphorius. If you really want to go deeper than this, I have a whole series dedicated to this storyline which I'll link in the top right, wink wink. Anyhow, among the 13, there's Kevin Kaslana, or the Phainon equivalent, the normal guy who became not so by being forced to be the guy who does everything, and by the end will be left in a state of an emotionally scarred war veteran, the natural state of a Honkai character. And then there's Elysia, who's damn near one-to-one with Cyrene. This pink-haired elf seems to be one of, if not the writer's favorite archetype, so I would imagine her fans are probably gonna be spoiled rotten with her content, and to be honest, they already are. You see, Elysia is like built different because she was also a Hersher but didn't have the preconceived desire of human extermination like the rest. She didn't even know she's that special until much later. So she spent much of her life living like a normal person. But then at the end of the road, where she became literally Jesus Christ by sacrificing herself to make it so that later Hershers may not try going after the humans, pretty much changing the course of history. If you play the recent story, I'm sure you can already see the many parallels in their stories. And now knowing this, it might put the Expys in Star Rail into a perspective, where some might see this as making the game harder to enjoy because it references some very deep stuff in the sense that you really need to play the other game quite thoroughly to understand, like 100 hours of playtime. On the other hand, even if someone decided to go play the other game and get to know all this, which isn't even half of it to be honest, they might be spoiling themselves the general direction of future stories. These are valid points to consider, but this may not be such a big negative. For example, it doesn't matter if you didn't know Seele and Bronya were good friends in the other game before you play Bellabog, because you get to see it happen organically. You don't need to know about May's backstory to understand Acheron's story, because you see their versions of stories being told to you. So the value here isn't what unique stories are being told, but the comparison of the similarities. There are edge cases like the web scene with Acheron where it was straight up commentary on what happened in a whole nother game, but the idea is that the universe, the Honkai universe, is expansive. As Acheron neatly puts it, it has many similar yet different worlds that also host similar faces who each has their own unique story independent of their counterpart, though parallels still exist. And it isn't all about the endpoint, as it's the in-between that gives everything value. This is the message Star Rail has always been telling us. It's just knowing what the end might be, but still looking forward to see if the road this time around will be any different. Basically, it really is the friends we make along the way. So perhaps instead of Expys, you might also think of these characters as variants, because they weren't exported from somewhere outside, as technically they all exist in the same big Honkai universe, but that's just semantics. This is what I think the Honkai on these games stand for. Overall, looking at the game's direction, I think it's inevitable that both games will be more intertwined as we go on. There's Welt, who came to Star Rail to protect Himeko from some aliens targeting her, because he felt partly responsible for his universe Himeko's demise. Not to mention, there's his other companion that came here with him that is still unaccounted for till this day. On the Honkai Impact side, we have a Vidyadhara cousin distributing paths of permanent stuff to people. There's a memo keeper who went to ask the game's main character if she could nab some of her memories, to which she got told to go pound sand, but not before asking some important questions like which Eon or paths rule the damn place. By the way, this main character, Kiana, is the Hersher of finality, so make of that information what you will. And that's where the community comes in. Because every time Star Rail shows an XP or reference anything from Honkai Impact, you'd be guaranteed to see the Honkai Impact players over in the comments telling you all about it, which also applies to this video. So what do you think about how Star Rail is handling their side of the story? Whether you play Star Rail or Impact Third exclusively, or if you're like me that plays both, let me know your thoughts down below. As a fairly long time Honkai Impact player, this is awesome. It's watching all the pieces and hints finally converging after being teased for so many years. For the people who don't play Third, it may seem like you're missing out on a lot from the game's framing of these characters, But really how Star Rail does it, most of these stories are still self-contained. Like cut out all the third player screaming, "Oh my god, it's true!" You probably wouldn't notice it. Unless of course, they circle back to the plot points I already mentioned. What I'm saying is, horror devs, please put Kiana in Star Rail. Hey people, thanks for watching. For those of you who's still here, channel update. To explain the lack of uploads, well, I graduated last April and the plan was to find a job ASAP to not starve, which looked quite tough cause AI, economic downturn, Gen Z, no experience. So I figured I would do YouTube while doing that, but I got very lucky and landed one in June. So I was busy settling work stuff like moving to a new city, bringing my gear over and fitting this alongside my work schedule, which where I live is 48 hours 6 days a week. Could be worse, but it really doesn't leave me with that much free time. The video I was making before on 3rd took too long and became outdated, so I scrapped it and made this instead. Eventually, I would like to get a decent upload schedule, but it's still in progress. I hope you all understand. In any case, hope to see you next time. Especially you regular viewers of this channel for allowing me to do what I can today. Goodbye.